Interesting note. It was chilly this morning when I woke up. I had to get work done, obviously. And I was wearing my UFC hoodie. It's just a cheap knockoff UFC hoodie, whatever. And the irony is that now that I'm filming a UFC prediction video for YouTube, I'm not wearing it. I just took it off because it is warm now. Because obviously we have various electrical devices that heat the room up. And it's not a particularly big room behind this background. Anyways, UFC 272, Colby Covington versus George Masvidal, aka the politically incorrect card, because you've got Covington and Masvidal, notable Trump supporters. Covington's had some negative statements about Brazilians in general, and really any other group you can think of that fit his shtick. Bryce Mitchell's had a lot of political hot takes lately, and of course Kevin Holland is Kevin Holland. In the sense that I just don't think there's a filter between Kevin Holland's mouth and his brain. Although I am loving the Kevin Holland beats up internet trolls. That is fantastic. And then you get Greg Hardy. And I don't think anything more needs to be said about that particular thing. I think everything about Greg Hardy has been stated. Big shout out to Renato Moicano, who's taking a fight on short notice in the co-main event against Rafael dos Anjos. We'll break that down when we get there. There is one thing that I am particularly annoyed about, though, about this card, and that is the position of the Marina Rodriguez Jananyan fight. Because for all intents and purposes, that is a number one contender at strawweight. It's a division that does not have a lot of marquee value beyond Thug Rose and Joanna Jacek, and to a certain extent, Weili Zhang. And pushing anyone else to that point, as you're seeing with Carlos Esparza getting a title shot, has been a struggle for the UFC. And part of that, though, is that much like the UFC's men's flyweight division, they don't position the fights as important. This has come up a number of times. Esparza coming off of a fairly far down the card performance against Marina Rodriguez, who then admittedly did get the big fight with Mackenzie Dern, so she has a little bit of notoriety right now. But it's not even the feature prelim. It's not on the pay-per-view portion of the card. It's not the feature prelim, which by the lineup I have is Jalen Turner versus Jamie Malarkey. Why? Like, that's a good fight. And I have a lot of, hope for Turner. But why? Why? Anyways, and then you also have the fact that you have Greg Hardy and Spivak on the main card, which, ignoring the Greg Hardy stuff for a moment here, still isn't a particularly great fight. Like, have I ever gotten hyped for a Sergey Spivak fight? Maybe his Tom Aspinall fight, but that was all about Aspinall. Maybe the Alexei Olenek fight, but that was all about Olenek. But, was I super stoked for him versus Jared Vanderrohe, Carlos Felipe, Marcin Tybura, Taito Ivasa, Walt Harris? Walt Harris a little bit. Walt Harris I'm always a little psyched about. But otherwise, no. And that's on the main card. And then you've also got Kevin Holland versus Alex Oliveira, which is really kind of a fight of, what does Kevin Holland look like at 170? And I think that would have also been a perfect undercard main event, like the featured prelim. I think that would be perfect, because I think Kevin Holland has that kind of cachet, and Alex Oliveira is a very respectable fighter. I think that would have been perfect. So, structure of the card, not great. Substance of the card, hit and miss. It's a hit in the sense that every fight on here is very meaningful. There is at least one part of this card that was going to be very exciting. Like, the weakest fight in terms of what this means for a division is Devontae Smith versus Ludovic Klein. That's a fairly decent fight. You also had a lot of very good fights on this card. You, of course, had Rafael dos Anjos versus Rafael Fiziev. That's going to be dope. You had Jessica Ai versus Manon Fiorot. That was very important, even if I wasn't looking forward to the actual dynamics of the fight. And, of course, Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. So there was all kinds of good stuff on here. And it's pretty good. But it doesn't have a lot of like big pay-per-view. Because like even the main event, it's not for the title. Yeah, the winner of this fight will probably get a third title shot, but they're a combined 0-4 against Kamaru Usman. I don't really see how they can improve to take a fight and test Usman because, to be honest, I've said this after both the Usman Covington fights, I thought Usman did not fight very smart against Covington both times and still beat him. And while Masvidal winning this fight in a certain way would sort of hype up a third fight, both their fights were very defined by the fact that Masvidal cannot stop Usman's wrestling while remaining dynamically aggressive on the feet. So that's not super entertaining. And then there's, like I said, there's the Rodriguez versus Yan fight, but we're being told not to care about that one because where it's placed on the card. Like it's below Turner versus Malarkey, which is a depth fight, admittedly in the deepest division in the world, 155, but it is a depth fight. Anyways, let's get on to predictions. Covington versus Masvidal. The problem with George Masvidal's career, and it's the problem with anyone who's had 50 professional MMA fights, relatively high profile, is that we have kind of seen what Masvidal's reactions to almost any type of opponent are. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And his reaction is someone who can take him down. I do believe Covington can. Even Masvidal has said he has been taken down by Covington in sparring, in training. Somewhat shuts him down. Kind of like I talked about with the Usman before, is that while he's fighting, his striking either will lead him into takedowns or he'll defend takedowns, and his striking will be smothered, reduced, brought down a level. Now, that being said, Masvidal, very tough. Covington does not have a diverse or particularly effective submission game. Over 5 rounds, does Masvidal get that chance to possibly finish Covington, to possibly hit him with, on the extreme end, a flying knee or a nice counter combination of punches? He is a better striker than Covington, but Covington's also, amongst the elite fighters in the division, one of the worst strikers. So he's had to deal with that before. I have to go with Covington. I've always said this. Sometimes I cannot divorce a fighter, we'll call it character, from their in-ring capabilities. But sometimes I can. And with Covington, it feels like I can. Because he had established himself in my brain long before the Trumper Covington, the trash-talking Covington, the super bootleg Conor McGregor Covington had come out. And that's allowed me to keep thinking about him just as a fighter. And honestly, as the second best welterweight in the world. I don't think anyone but Usman can shut down his pressure pace game. The problem is I think Usman does it very easily. So like a third fight between the two isn't appealing. And to be clear, a third fight between two fighters where one fighter has beaten the other one twice seldom is very interesting. But here we are. Yeah, so Covington might be by decision, might be by rear naked choke, might be by TKO. Like, there's a lot of options there, but like how the fight looks is very determined in my head. Covington's going to put Masvidal on his back. He's going to swarm him with pressure. He's going to scramble him. He's going to have moments where he could possibly end the fight from the back, or from a dominant position with ground and pound. That may or may not happen. Masvidal's super tough, might go the full distance, but Masvidal's hope is a kind of one moment thing, like one big moment, and I can never really bet on that. What's the betting line on this one? Yeah, it looks like Vegas is in agreement with me. Covington sits at a -330 right now, so yeah, he's favored. So I'm not doing anything bizarre or weird with that one. Rafael dos Anjos, Renato Moicano, super late notice replacement fight for Moicano. I've got to go with Rafael dos Anjos. RDA is someone who is definitely past his prime. We're talking about a guy who lost fairly easily to Michael Chiesa, to Leon Edwards, to Kamaru Usman, to Colby Covington, to Tony Ferguson back in the day. It's been a rough ride for the last 6 years. But in that time, there's still been some good wins. There's been Robbie Lawler. There's been Neil Magny. There's been Tarek Saffiedine, who I think is a very underrated win. Kevin Lee, Paul Felder. The problem here basically comes down to is that I think Moicano in the pocket and in the wrestling exchanges is vulnerable. It's not really actually been the way to beat him. But I do think that this fight is more about what beats RDA. And Moicano doesn't really have it. He's a good grappler, but RDA, you're not really going to submit him. He's a actually very excellent, well put together kickboxer, but he relies on reach to keep people a bit at bay. He does have a reach advantage of 2 inches in this fight and a height advantage of 3 inches. But I think RDA will be able to march him down. Will be able to get the job done. I mean, he was training. You could say the change of opponent's a big deal, but he was training for Rafael Fiziev, who is very different from Moicano. I want to make that clear. I'm not saying Moicano, Fiziev equal sign. No. But their base range that they want the fight at and the base type of fight that they want to have is very similar. So I think RDA will be very prepared and probably will get this one done. Maybe by decision. RDA hasn't really been submitting people lately. He did submit Kevin Lee, but didn't submit Lawler, despite having opportunities to. Didn't submit Saffiedine. Did submit Neil Magny. I don't know. I just don't feel it. I think Moicano's... I want to say Moicano's only submission loss is Brian Ortega. Am I correct on that? Yes. Yes. And Ortega is super venomous. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Dos Anjos by decision. Edson Barboza, Bryce Mitchell. This is a weird fight because Bryce Mitchell does represent the type of fighter who has historically had a lot of success against Barboza. Someone who's going to be aggressive, someone who's going to be tough, someone who's going to prioritize takedowns and not really want to strike with them. The weird thing is that when you look at Bryce Mitchell, is this a I must see it moment? Because at 14-0, the best striker he has beaten is Andre Fili. That's a good win. That's a good win. But that is really short of Edson Barboza in a nutshell. It's really short. You could argue who is Barboza beat that has a good pressure takedown game. And it's admittedly very short. We're going back to Beneil Dariush before he really particularly learned how to strike, 2017 Dariush. Gilbert Melendez, who was a bit past his prime. Evan Dunham back in 2014. So, there is definitely that. It's kind of a weird, I have no real faith in either of you to actually win this matchup, but one of you is going to. And what do I go with on that? I know Mitchell's coming in as a slight favorite. He's got the momentum on his side. Edson Barboza it's not. He's looked good, but not amazing at 145. And strikers going down usually isn't a great idea. I'm going to go with Bryce Mitchell to win this fight via submission, probably at some point, because Barboza does give opportunities to choke and so on. I've seen Barboza lose, admittedly, slightly better versions of this matchup, possibly. But I have seen him lose those matchups. I've not seen Bryce Mitchell lose this type of matchup. We have seen Bryce Mitchell lose. He's undefeated professionally, but he did lose to Brad Katona on the Ultimate Fighter. I guess you could say there is something of Katona and Barboza, but I don't rate Ultimate Fighter stuff that highly. It's a weird environment. You'll get some results that in hindsight don't really make a lot of sense, and that's one of them. But I am going to go with Bryce Mitchell to win by submission, but I may regret this. Kevin Holland versus Alex Oliveira. This comes down to, frankly, one question. At 6'3", what does Kevin Holland look like at 170? Is he fine? Is he good? Trains at Travis Lutter JJ. They're not known for great weight cutting. He is very thin. If he comes out looking fine, he'll beat Alex Oliveira. The reason is fairly simple. Oliveira is... How do I put this? Oliveira is a bully fighter. Almost all of his wins involve him having some kind of physical edge over somebody. Doesn't matter if it's Peter Sabata, Carlo Pedersoli, Carlos Condit, Ryan LaFleur, etc. The maybe one exception is Max Griffin, but Max Griffin is kind of like not a stylistic mirror match, but a mental mirror match where he wants to have physical advantages over you, and when he doesn't have them, he's a little bit shaky. So it was kind of both of them being shaky. Excuse me, I have a little sniffle going on. So yeah, I'm going to go with Kevin Holland, but I may regret it when I see the weigh-ins if he looks like, dead. But yeah, Holland by probably submission. Oliveira has fallen into submissions. Holland has good submissions. And yeah, I'm not sure if the 170 move is actually a good idea for Holland long term. It's a division with better wrestlers than 185, which was his problem at 185. But I don't think Oliveira is the guy to answer it. Sergey Spivak versus Greg Hardy. Spivak. Probably by decision. I could see him finishing Hardy easily, but Greg Hardy... Ignoring Greg Hardy's criminal issues and personal character flaws, he's just not very good. I think someone pointed out that like everyone he's beaten is no longer on UFC contract. And I know Smoliakov isn't. I know Adams isn't. I know Cezzoli isn't. DeCastro isn't. Is Maurice Green still on contract? If he is, it's a moderate miracle because he is 1-4 in his last 5. And while he is 4-4 in the UFC, his wins are not good. I mean, his best win is... His most recognizable win is Gian Vellante, but it's not good. Junior Albini? I don't know. Yeah, I've got to go with Spivak on this one. He would be the worst of the 5 fighters, with the exception of Alan Crowder, which was a DQ loss, to beat Greg Hardy, because Tai Tuivasa is good, Marcin Tybura is good, Volkov is good, but he has a lot of the similar aspects to Tybura, basically, but actually is, I think, a way more effective wrestler and a little bit more athletic, a little bit more explosive. And that was mostly the only thing Hardy had. All that and better range striking, but was the only thing that really hard he had against Tybura. And I think Spivak can do similar things. Jalen Turner versus Jamie Malarkey. I'm going with Jalen Turner. Malarkey has exceeded expectations, honestly. When he came in, I didn't have high hopes for him. I mean, I love his name and everything, but I honestly didn't have the highest hopes for him. He lost to Brad Riddell. He lost to Fares Siam. I think that Fares Siam fight, in hindsight, looks kind of bad. He did beat Kama Worthy. He did beat Devontae Smith. And obviously, he is a quality fighter. He's a deep technician, but he's a somewhat limited athlete. Turner is very, very, very good. And who would have thought that, actually, when he came in to debut against Vicente Luque and kind of got bombed on. And then he nearly lost to Matt Frivola, and there's some things there, but he's looked real good lately. Granted, it is against Josh Kulabau, Brock Weaver, and Uros Medic. Not great fighters, not the high-level UFC competition. Malarkey is, I would say, better than all of those, but despite it being his best win, I just think that there's a lot of athletic upside there that is going to take him out. And he's got excellent coaching, I think. So that's another thing to really consider. And yeah, I'm going with Turner. I'm going to say... Question, I guess, in terms of method is, does Malarkey have a tendency to get subbed? Because Turner really likes the club and sub. He's never been subbed. Okay. Okay, so I'll go TKO at some point. Turner hits really, really hard. Marina Rodriguez versus Jan. There is definitely a path to victory for Jan here, and that is that Rodriguez is very lazy about her wrestling. She has the raw physicality. I'm sorry, I dropped something and I can't see it. Oh, there it is. Okay. She has the raw physicality and the raw strength and everything you would need to actually be a really, really, really hard to take down fighter. And she just isn't. And Jan does have good takedowns. She's actually quite well-rounded. She's quite good. She is coming off a loss to Carla Esparza. There's no shame in that. Esparza is very, very good. She has beaten physically impressive fighters like Claudia Gadelia in her run, and very technical ones like Karolina Kowalkiewicz, although that is a weird one, and Angela Hill. But I'm taking Rodriguez. Despite the fact that the path to victory for Jan really is there. It's called a takedown. Rodriguez hits quite hard, and I think she'll stop her. I do believe we will see Marina Rodriguez fight for a title at some point. The UFC seems to like her reasonably well, and as much as this style has been a tripping point for her loss to Carla Esparza, for example, or was that a draw? She's had 2 draws. It's always so weird. No, it's the loss to Esparza, and she drew with Calvillo and Marcos. And those are all similar fighters. And similar to Jan. But I think at this point, she's gotten to the point where she should be able to do this. And if she doesn't, I'm kind of losing faith. Nick Negumereanu versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say his name. I've heard it said, and I still can't get behind it. I don't know why Negumereanu is admittedly a very slight underdog, but an underdog nonetheless. I don't have faith in either guy. I mean, in Negumereanu, you've got to win over Ike Villanueva and to win over Alexis Kamer. The Kamer win, at the time, I thought reasonably well of, and Kamer hasn't fought since, but the losses to both Knight and Kamer, I don't know. It really points to a bully mentality in Kamer, which being the main partner of Stipe Miocic, you'd think wouldn't be the case, but he seems to be desperately uncomfortable when he can't just physically do things. I am a little bit worried about Nick Negumereanu. He's 6 foot tall, very slim. does feel like maybe a move to 185 is eventually going to be in the cards. And it's a bit weird that he hasn't done that yet because he's facing a guy who's 6'3" or 6'5". Pardon me. So there's a massive height differential there, and 5-inch reach advantage. So there's a lot of concerns, but I also don't believe in Kennedy either. Like a win over Carlos Ulberg is the high watermark. I'll go with Kennedy to win the fight, but he trains at Fortis MMA and he's tall. We'll roll with it. Marina Rodriguez versus Maria Agapova. I'm going with Maria Agapova. This is another kind of bad blood fight. Morose has some considerable statements to make about Agapova and her quality as a person. Agapova refutes them heavily, but I've never really been impressed by Morose. She's just tall. Like, if you can solve her height, you can solve her. Granted, everyone who's done that is better than Agapova, but Agapova, very physically impressive. Her one loss in the UFC does still feel very random. That loss to Shayna Dobson feels like it should not have happened. She fought Sabina Mazo recently. That's a similar style and physicality question mark. I think she's stronger. I think she's more physically impressive. I think she'll get the job done. Probably by TKO. Although I will be cheering for Morose, because if anything Morose has said about Agapova is true. Oh, God. Ooh. It's terrifying. Umar Nurmagomedov will probably beat Brian Kelleher. I'm not necessarily on the Umar Nurmagomedov hype train necessarily. Beating Sergey Morozov is a good win, but it's not that amazing, and everything else is, Russian regional scene, a little bit of PFL. But Brian Kelleher is very susceptible to defensive lapses, getting submitted, and Nurmagomedov is a very good submission artist. So, yeah. Nurmagomedov to beat Brian Kelleher. Tim Elliott versus Tadjir Ulanbekov. I guess the question here is, how much do I think Tim Elliott has just faded? Because I'm not a big believer in Ulanbekov. I think there's some good stuff there. Don't get me wrong. But the split decision win over Alad Nascimento and the win over Bruno Silva does not tell me that much. The thing with Elliott is he's undergoing a transformation, and at 35 years old, it's kind of old at flyweight to fix what's wrong with your game. May I say this as someone who is 35 years old? I am just slightly younger than Tim Elliott. And I'm calling him old. But I mean, again, it's fight game old. It's not life old. I'm going to take a flyer and go with Ulanbekov. Seems like I say flyer, but he's a minus 255 favorite for some reason. So if you're looking to make money, Elliott is the underdog. It's not a bad pick. He just brings a level of frantic effort and activity that I've yet to see anyone fully be ready for. But he does gas himself out. And Ulanbekov has the grappling chops to probably survive the early storm and pick up the win. Devontae Smith should beat Ludovic Klein, but he also should have won all of his UFC fights and lost to Jamie Malarkey and Kama Worthy. So weird. There's so much physical presence in him, and dangerous striking, and I'm taking him to finish Klein, but oh my lord. I get the distinct feeling that Devontae Smith can lose to just about anybody. Dustin Jacoby versus Michael Oleksandr. I'm going with Dustin Jacoby because Oleksandr's very undersized at the weight class and doesn't do the things that tend to be the problem for Jacoby. I'm honestly very surprised to see Jacoby down here because he is on a 5, possibly more. Pull this up here. He's on a very long winning streak since coming to the UFC. Well, unbeaten streak. 5 fights. Beat Ledet, beat Grishin. The draw with Kudalaba. That's a good draw, though. Beat Darren Stewart, beat John Allen. Oleksandr, like, I'm a big fan of Michael Oleksandr. I really am. I love watching him fight. There's a activity that you don't see at 205 much. There's a hard-headedness. There is a lot to like about him. But you give Jacoby a predominantly striking matchup where he doesn't need to worry about explosive takedowns. Not that Oleksandr won't take you down. It's just that Oleksandr's way of taking you down is kind of secondary to his striking game. He kind of boxes his way into the clinch, grinds on you. If you present him the takedown, he will do it. Jacoby deals very well with that type of fight. And Oleksandr's super tough. So do I think Jacoby finishes him? I guess that's the question. Because, I mean, he's been submitted twice in the UFC, Jimmy Crute and Oven St. Preux. But he has not been finished since 2014 by strikes. That's the only time. So I'll go Jacoby by decision because reach, range, technical striking, physicality to a degree. And it just really also feels like Dustin Jacoby out of Factory X and Muay Thai has really put it together. Kind of ironic that I'm picking 2 Factory X guys right down at the bottom after recommending Factory X in my MMA simulator. Am I boosting the squad? Yeah, there's a lot of interesting fights. Like, I mean, there's very few picks on here that I feel super confident about. Like if Kelleher beats Nurmagomedov, I'll be surprised. If Malarkey beats Turner, I'll be surprised. That's about it, really. I mean, Moicano or Masvidal picking up a win also seems kind of stretchy out, which is weird that the two, the main and the co-main are two of the stronger feeling picks I have, which is interesting. But that is that. So I will see you next card, or if I feel like I need to do a recap of this card, we'll hit that up. I guess on the Islam Makhachev card last week, the thing I really have to say is that I find myself uninvested in the pro and anti-Makhachev debate that's going on social media. Because on the pro side, you have people who are like, if he doesn't get the next title shot, it's a complete robbery. And on the other side of things, it's if he gets the title shot, it's stupid. Basically, because on one hand you have 10 straight wins, and on the other hand you have a lack of particularly ranked wins, particular contender wins. The only thing I'll really say is that on the pro Makhachev side, it does have to be said that he does lack signature wins. And we could talk about whose fault that is all day long, but he does lack them. And on the anti-Makhachev side, I have to say, well, then who gets the title shot instead of him? Because I don't think you can reward Beneil Dariush with a title shot for pulling out of that fight, which could have set up a championship contender and been a signature win for either Dariush or Makhachev. And I think Dariush suffers from largely the same problems. His biggest win is the ghost of Tony Ferguson? I mean, saying Makhachev's win over Dan Hooker is worse than that is a bit weird. Someone was saying that it has to be either Chandler, Poirier, or Gaethje basically has to be involved to get a title shot. I don't think Chandler does. I think Chandler has lost twice. I think Chandler is out of that line of succession. I think Poirier, maybe it's just my feeling that I want to see Poirier kind of dedicated back to fighting for a little bit, because after he lost to Oliveira, just some of the things he seemed distinctly unhappy, a little bit unmotivated even, and I don't necessarily want to see that in a title match. I kind of want to see him do his thing and get back to that. Like I hope he does, but I kind of want to see that. And then Gaethje is already fighting for the title, so what do you do if he loses? So yeah, I don't have a strong feeling about it, but I don't have an anti-feeling about it either. So, and there was some terrible judging, but that's par for the course. So enjoy the fights. We'll see how much this card changes. So I'm doing this one far out. It's Tuesday. I usually like to do it closer to the fight card because we get the whole, like, things falling apart. Because, like, for example, yesterday we had the Fiziev RDA fight fall apart, and then Moicano stepping in now. So, like, things can change, and I like to give you that. But at the same time, we'll get it out a little bit early. See what happens. See if the views go better.